All right. Hey, everyone. I am here to talk with you about this episode from Desperate to Rewired, my journey to the spark. And I can remember a specific evening. Oh, wow. This has been some time ago. And it's a scene I'm sure is familiar, that's familiar with many of you. One of my kids was sitting at the kitchen table and they were just staring at that math sheet, the homework sheet that gets sent home all the time. And they were looking at it as if it was written in some kind of ancient hieroglyphics. And you could just feel what was going on. I mean, the silence was heavy and you can just hear this faint tapping of a pencil. And of course, I'm a teacher myself, so I was in full on helpful dad mode, which is really not always so helpful. And so I try to come at it with logic, try to come at it with encouragement. And in my own mind, I thought, wow, I'm being pretty patient here. But they were just stuck and starts kicking the table legs, squirming in their seats, staring into space, and then that's it. And so the more I tried to push, the more I tried to say, hey, it's not that bad, it's okay, you've got this. Anything I tried to say and even tried to help was not being received very well. And it seems the more I pushed, the more my kid shut down. And I remember this thought that flashed through my head. And it was like kind of shameful, I thought it, but I thought it, and I thought, they're doing this to me on purpose, and this is going to be a battle of wills, and guess what? I'm the parent, so I will win. So even though the pencils are cracking and they're flying across the room, and here I am, so wrong, so deeply, deeply wrong. So we're here, and again, this is The Rewired Parent. I'm your host, Dr. David A. Palmer, and that moment at my kitchen table, that was one of thousands, if not millions, it seems like, that led me here to the microphone talking straight to you. And this show is all about dismantling the outdated parenting advice that's failing our kids, failing us as adults. And I'm here to replace it with something that actually works. But before we get into the tools and the science, I need to tell you a little bit about my story in this episode, because I wasn't always the guy with the answers. I don't always have the answers anyway now, but I have more, but I wasn't always there. And for a long time, I was, like many of you, a desperate parent, feeling so much like a failure. And my journey started where many of yours might be right now, in the trenches. So yes, I have a doctorate in special education. Yes, I've been an educational leader in the classroom and in schools for over 30 years. And on paper, I'm the person who was supposed to have it all figured out. But at home with my own amazing, complex, neurodivergent kids, I was drowning. I've been there in those big public meltdown moments. I remember one time we were at the Discovery Museum for kids. It would be a great place for kids, but one of my kids, because of sensory processing challenges in that, and something didn't go just the way it was supposed to go, so we had the full-blown on-the-floor meltdown, and I'm looking around, kind of glancing around at the other parents whose kids are all playing so nicely and having so much fun, and I'm getting that mix of pity and judgment from them. And you know what I'm feeling, as the face starts getting hot, you start sweating, because that's what happens to me. And I'm thinking, okay, I've worked with youth groups, I've worked as a teacher, and all of it didn't matter. All of it didn't matter. I was just that dad with the screaming kid and feeling like I was the worst parent in the world. And, I've tried everything we all do, read the books, watch the social media reels, try, reward stickers. We've tried, hey, you do good, we'll put, this marble in the jar kind of thing. And I tried to be, okay, just, listening to my own parents' advice to tell me how to parent. You just need to use your stern, loud voice and they'll know you're serious. But then that didn't always work, and tried to be gentle, and they kind of ran over me. So nothing worked. And if it did work, it maybe would work for a day. Then the next day it's like starting all over again. And the worst part was this disconnect that I felt, and we feel a lot of times, that we're just kind of becoming the homework enforcer or the consequence giver. We're kind of like the warden in our own home. And we lose that joy. It gets sucked out of our family. Everybody's just walking on eggshells and stressed. There's this low-grade tension that's always lingering in the air. And just like I thought I was supposed to do as a teacher, we manage, right? We manage their behavior. But in a sense, relationship is missing, and we're missing them. So the turning point for me came not from a parenting book or necessarily a podcast, but really my interest I've always had in brain science. And for a long time, it focused primarily on how we learn, but then it started to shift into what I was seeing and applying at home in terms of what's behind the science, and got into just reading about trauma, reading about polyvagal theory, and then started looking up things about what's the amygdala, what's its role in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and dopamine, and then started to understand my own ADHD brain. And as I read, it was like someone turned on the lights in a room that I'd been stumbling around in for years. And I just remember, this isn't a battle of wills, it's a battle of wiring. And what I had been calling defiance was actually a nervous system screaming, I don't feel safe right now. And what I had often attributed to laziness with my kids and students was their brain hitting the very real wall of task paralysis. And the meltdowns were not a choice and trying to make life miserable for me, but they were their biological responses to being pushed past the neurological threshold. That window of tolerance had just slammed shut. And I had to come to this realization that I wasn't a bad parent, and my kids were definitely not bad kids. We were all just dysregulated. And that reframe is really what started to change everything. And I stopped asking, how do I get my child or my student to do this? And started asking, what does my child's nervous system need right now to feel safe enough to do this? And that's the spark. The core philosophy of this entire movement that I am pushing forward is stop fighting the fire, understand the spark. Stop fighting the fire and understand the spark, which means you have to throw out the old playbook. You have to do some experimenting. You have to replace timeouts, which often trigger, especially with attachment. It triggers feelings of abandonment, which makes it worse. We replace it with co-regulation. And instead of our marble jar and them feeling frustrated and me feeling frustrated because I wasn't consistent with it, or honestly, I didn't feel like they earned enough of them, we just started to do, and still are trying to do now that they're teens, some nervous system resets. And we talk a little bit more now in our home about our nervous system, what it feels like in our bodies when we're starting to get stressed, when we know we're going to start this fight, flight, or freeze moment. And that's when things start to shift, and it takes time. But I will tell you that when there's this equal understanding, connections start to deepen and the joy starts to come back, and we don't feel like we're having to control behaviors or always getting our kids in trouble all the time, but we actually get to know them, and it's a beautiful thing. So we've had those situations. In fact, I can remember, again, not too long ago, now that the kids are older, we were out shopping at an outlet, and the meltdowns, they started to feel it again, the stress and the anxiety. And I saw again the meltdown. I saw the flight, we got to get out of this place. And then when they were in a calmer place, just collapsing on the ground for a little while. And now there's a lot more empathy. Now there's a lot more understanding. Now there's a lot more being with them with authentic presence instead of just telling them what they need to do or what they're feeling isn't really validated and all those things. And so again, with these teens, I'm not here today to tell you I've got it all figured out and I'm the perfect expert with perfect children, but I'm telling you I'm on the journey with you as a fellow traveler who found, I believe, what's a better map based on neuroscience, based on empathy, based on this radical idea that our kids are not problems to be solved, that they're not needing to be fixed, but they are humans that need to be understood. And that's where my journey has been for a long time and continues to move forward. And so moving from just clueless and desperate to now becoming more and more rewired. And that's why I have created this podcast. That's why I write these Substack blogs and send you emails and all of that, is to share that map with you so that you can find your own path back to connection. So in our next episode, we're going to dive a little more deeply into your first practical tool from that map. We're going to talk about a brain reset that you can use right away. And so make sure you catch that when that podcast drops, and just say thank you for being here. And once again, welcome to the Rewired Parent.